Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Doom Patrol. A great episode, a lot of nice emotions, kind of like a somber episode in certain regards, but obviously there's a lot of kind of breakdown. Obviously you have like Vic and Jane. Now, it's so interesting because obviously you kind of go, Jane's the one gathering up the team for meetings and stuff like that. Typically, that's Vic's whole deal. I love that she's chewing Rita out. It's like, oh, if only we had some beard hunter who could eat beard from Niles and then tell us where he is, like some, like, beard-eating bloodhound or something like that. And it's like kind of chewing them out for everything. Obviously, you have Cliff dealing with the whole fact is that, like, Bump died and he wants to be there for Clara, but, like, you know, you have Jane being like, why would you even do that? Like, isn't that the dude who fucked your wife and everything? So, like, why would you even care about the situation? But, like, she's my daughter and everything, and obviously Rita's kind of being supportive of it and everything, and they kind of go off on their adventure this episode, but I'll get to that in a second. But Jane ends up helping out Vic, because Vic's kind of going through his thing this episode, because he's talking to Grid, and it seems like Grid is growing more, like this cybernetic side of him. Like, and I think that's something that probably constantly pops up during Cyborg's story of like him being part cyborg like he is, balancing trying to not become too much cybernetics and try to keep that human nature of his. And obviously he's talking to Grid, but Grid is like, the fact of the matter is something amazing is happening to you, like basically saying you're like 63% cyber. Before you were just cyber, now you're 63% cyber. And he's like, wait, doesn't seem to be any more cybernetics on the outside. It's like, oh, but on the inside you're changing. It's becoming extraordinary. To the point he literally cuts his own arm open and he looks, he sees flesh. He's like, okay, good. But then he sees like cybernetics kind of underneath that. So he's worried that the machine is taking over. And obviously him and Jane, and I think that's kind of interesting. This is our first time really getting Jane and Vic kind of alone together, them kind of bonding. In a sense that in Vic's case, he's like, you know, he's shutting Grid down because he's afraid that the machine is taking over, which, you know, Jane completely understands. It's like, dude, if I could shut my shit down, I'd do it in an instant, but, you know, I would have done it long before now, but I can't. Because for him, it's like the whole thing of like, oh, you know, whether there's something swelling inside of you that if it lets out, it could cause a lot of damage and hurt a lot of people. And he feels that. He's like, the fact is, last episode, that could have been me killing you, Rita, Larry, you know. Side note, well, I guess because part of me was like, side note, notice he didn't mention Cliff, but then in retrospect, I'm like, well, Cliff's a robot, so he probably could have survived the blast. His body's pretty stable enough and sturdy enough to survive it, so I guess that's the kind of thing about that. So the reason why he didn't bring that up, but everyone else could have died. And so it's interesting because obviously, like, Jane kind of explains her motives because obviously she wants to find the chief because the chief has answers to everything. Like why he was going to send her off with the Doom Patrol. It's like, you know, why was he going to leave me off there? And it's like, well, the chief probably has his reasons. It's like, well, yeah, he probably does, and that's why I need to hear them. Sadly, immediately after, we have Vic being kidnapped by the Normalcy Bureau because they showed up. Well, I guess they've been tracking them ever since Danny Street. I guess they've been keeping an eye on them. Like, they made it, like, you know, Larry and Vic made an enemy of the Bureau of Normalcy. Well, they definitely already had their eyes on the Doom, well, the group already. Everyone at Doom managed, they already had their eyes on them anyway, I guess. And I guess meeting up, using the Beard Hunter just kind of helped them isolate them. Because it turns out because the whole clue they were following is like some dude named Flex Mantello, his wife Dolores. I wonder were they captured by the Bureau of Normalcy, and so when she tried to reach out to them, like it was actually the Bureau that answered because they had already gotten them, or did they intercept it and like Flex and his wife are still out there or whatever. Which is interesting because it's like, it seems like Flex disappeared from the comic book. Maybe it's supposed to represent the fact that he's been gone from the comic book or whatever. I mean, I don't know. Or maybe that in itself was just supposed to be the sign of like, oh, go look for him. I have no idea. So there's that, which obviously the Bureau of Normalcy is definitely going to be an issue going forward, but what that exactly entails, especially with everything that Vic's going through, they might just push Vic. They might even be trying to make Vic their weapon of like, oh, we're going to utilize him to be the weapon, turn him into like a pure cybernetic man, make him go full cyborg, and he'll be the weapon that ends up helping us capture and destroy all oddities in the world. You know, maybe that's potentially the route they're going down, but we'll ultimately have to wait and see. So there's that side of things. I wonder what that whole thing is. Those people like, look at my elbows. Like, what is that? I guess it's something that kind of knocks you unconscious or something. I'm only assuming just the way they were able to get Vic. Luckily for Jane, she was able to kind of knock the dude down and kick his ass before that could happen. It's interesting, too, because she made a point this episode of being like, she's not going to get inside of her head for the time being, because for her, it's like, she's trying to remain herself for now, and I guess she doesn't want all the drama associated with her head and, you know, the whole, like, underground right now. She's just trying to be herself and still trying to figure everything out, because obviously her last trip to the underground wasn't that, made her kind of confront some stuff she didn't want to confront. Even led to a conversation between her and Rita where it's like, Rita's like, oh yeah, you don't want to help out Cliff even though he went in to help you, and it's like, nobody saved me. Get that right. I guess for Jane, it's like, she doesn't want to accept the fact is that, like, someone, like, for her, it's like, no, I did it on my own. I don't need anyone saving. I don't need to rely on anyone. Which is interesting that she actually went to Vic in this episode being like, I need your help. It's kind of, she doesn't really ask for help. So I think that in itself kind of speaks volumes about this whole situation. It just shows you how desperate she is to find the chief so she can get answers. But maybe there's more to it. Maybe it's not just about answers about why he was going to put her there, but also, like, answers about who she is. Like, maybe the chief has figured out what my purpose is, what my role is with this whole situation. Another side of things dealt with Cliff going to Bump's funeral, and I love that. I love Rita meeting up with Big D. I also love that we learned that her real name is Gertrude. Like, this is her trying to get back her identity, because obviously she doesn't like being Rita anymore. It's like Rita was this disguise she put on for so long that she kind of lost herself, and she wants to go back to try and find out who she is, who she was before it all, being Gertrude Cramp again. I love her kind of spending time with Big D and everything. We kind of get a little backstory about Bump, the whole alligator situation. I also love that we also get a little side note in the background, once again, of Steve Larson, a.k.a. was an animal, vegetable, mineral man. He's on trial for that robbery, and it's like, oh, he won't tell on his partner, which was his dinosaur head. I love that whole situation. It's the craziness of the show, dude. Nevertheless, Bump ended up getting eaten by an alligator, and Clara told this very touching story about Bump, of how he took her in and everything. And, you know, like, obviously, because, you know, every time Cliff is like, oh yeah, Bump loved to sleep with people's wives. I'm just kidding again, because obviously he still holds a lot of resentment. It's like, not like you were the most faithful person either, but I think for him it's just because he's just pissed off at everything, because his life kind of ended up the way it did. And not only did this dude screw your wife, he also took your daughter in. So it's like, but for him, what hurts the most is because Clara is like, he's like my dad. The fact is, he's my hero. The fact is, Bump took me and he adopted me when I was, you know, we officially made it official when I was like 18. And like, basically the inheritance she got from her parents was like this gold watch. And that gold watch was kind of the only thing she had left of her family. And it was very valuable. But for her, her relationship with Bump was more valuable, because he was there for her. And him caring about her was the most valuable thing in the world. So she had the watch inscribed to my dad, my hero essentially. And the moment the adoption got finalized, and you know this got cut a little deeper because that watch is Cliff's, and to have her write that about someone else that isn't her actual dad. And obviously he has a hard time dealing with all this. He's like, no, when it's all said and done, I'm going to go to find Frances and get that watch back. Because if I do, she'll know how much I care about her. Because obviously Cliff just can't bring himself to say the words. I also love that Rita was kind of trying to give him essentially acting exercises that, like red leather, yellow leather. He's like, red leather, yellow. Why am I saying this? And she's like, okay, do your lips like this, as like a horse. And he's like, I can't, no lips. Hence why I'm nervous. She's like, right. I just love her. It's just so interesting. Like, Rita, Gertrude, is trying to handle things her own way, like trying to help him, like the way she would kind of ease herself, you know? So, but yeah, they're both going in the swamp looking for the alligator. And she's like, basically, she keeps saying, just talk to Clara, but he won't. Because for him, it's like, words, it's too late for words. It's like, what am I supposed to say? Hey, I'm your dad. I know you thought I died, but like basically 30 years ago, I got put inside, my brain is here inside a giant robot. I'm inside a giant tin can. Am I supposed to just say that? I even love the excuse they came up with, like, oh, what's up with you? It's like, oh yeah, Bump made this costume for my friend. Yeah, we're going with that excuse. I love that. And, it's kind of sad because you see it all kind of defeat Cliff to a certain extent, because for him it's just kind of like I guess I don't, it's like he almost feels like he can't win in this situation, because it's just kind of like he's so desperate to get her attention, because he's like, I don't know what else to do. I want to be in her life. I want to make up for the mistakes. This is the only way I can do it. Like, because for him, I think he feels like words won't be enough. It's like words is not going to make her, look at me like her dad again or like her hero. I want to be that in her eyes again, and I can't. And I think that whole thought process defeats him. And fortunately for him, or maybe unfortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, Francis pops up. I love that slow motion of it just jumping up, and apparently Cliff kicked Francis's ass. So obviously it was mainly about the watch, but I guess you can almost look at it as like, oh, he almost in a sense got justice for his friend, even though him and Bomb had a very complicated relationship. And he drops the watch off to Clara and just walks away. He doesn't say anything to her. I think he was too scared to actually say something. And I wonder, will she read more into that? Will she try and track him down to thank him? Will Cliff ever try and bridge the gap between him and Clara? Will he ever tell her the truth? Maybe eventually down the road, but for now I think he's just distancing himself from her. It's actually sad because it's such a beautiful moment, because obviously this and stuff with Larry, which I'll get to in a second, but it all has that Moon River song playing on top of it, and it's like, oh, that's so beautiful. It's like it hits you with that somberness, and you're just like, oh, it kind of makes you want to weep a little bit. The whole situation kind of breaks your heart, especially with Larry's situation. There's beauty yet kind of sadness to that whole situation. I do love, because it even crossed my mind to think like, oh, Larry would have his own episode too, because he was unconscious the entire time, but it's like, nope, his only lasted a little bit. Boop. But it's a continuous thing, because obviously in his dream he was with John and they were in a motel, but it's a little different from before, because the truck, obviously that's connected to our memories, but this place, we've never been here before. It's somewhere that Larry was like, oh, I want to spend time with John there, and so it kind of got recreated by the negative spirit. But when it's all said and done, he goes back in, and it's so interesting because you see him having a different relationship with the spirit in this episode. He's like, no, come on, pal, please help me out. And he gets sent to a bar. And you could tell immediately, and it's kind of sad, that Larry was uncomfortable, because it's like, I think it's a combination of many different things. Because at first, I think it's just the fact that he's in a gay bar. I think it makes him feel a little uncomfortable, because, yes, he admitted he loved John, but I think it's still the aspect of accepting it himself, that he's gay, that being around other gay people, I think it still felt odd to him, because for him, he wanted their love to be a private thing, which is so, it's kind of shitty, because it's like our love was such a secret for so long. Like, even here, even in his dream world, you're so scared of who might see us, maybe your wife or whoever, that you won't let us just be. There's plenty of fine people and friends to hang around here. We're in a gay bar, we're safe, because we couldn't even be in this situation before, because we would have had to drive like 6 hours to the nearest gay bar just to find somewhere safe that we can be okay. And even here when we are, you're scared, And it's like, he's like, I have too little time to be kind of wasting it on, something like this. You too scared to kind of be with me, essentially love me in public, and just wanting it to kind of, be almost like it's something shameful to be hidden behind doors. And it's sad, because you can understand for Larry, because Larry had hidden that away for so long. He kind of denied that part of himself for so long that obviously it's something hard to break. And that's the whole conversation. It's like, the world has changed, but you haven't, Larry. You stayed the same. And so luckily, Larry, the spirit, was able to kind of point him in the right direction. And I figured the moment John was like, oh yeah, like I'm not going to waste my final days, I'm like, he's an old man, right? He's still alive now, and that's what he meant. Like, because it wasn't just like, oh, this isn't just some random dream or something. Basically, the spirit was bridging the gap. I guess because John is on the cusp of passing away, that basically it kind of brought him and Larry to it, like the state that Larry's in when the spirit gets removed from him. It puts him on that same plane of death that I guess that John's tiptoeing. So it's that I guess, as Kingdom Hearts would put it, the borderlines between dreams and death. That line, there's a little overlap there. So I think that's what we got in this, and that's how that whole situation happened. And Larry goes and meets with John. The lady that's taking care of him is like, you're Larry. Because she's like, I saw the bandages and everything. It's like, John just talks about you all the time, especially lately. And so it seems that, John led a good life and everything. And it's like, he's happy to see that Larry's there. And I think them sharing that moment together, you know, it's beautiful. It's sad, like, the life they could have led, sure, but, you know, at the end of the day, John led a good life. He was happy. I even love him cracking a joke of like, wait, so that means you haven't had sex since JFK? And they're laughing about it and stuff like that because, you know, Larry kind of kept himself in solitude. Because even John admits, hey, it took me a while, but I eventually got over you. And he's like, I moved on, and I think you should too. And, you know, Larry's like, I want you to know that I meant it what I said in that motel. I do love you. You know, and it's just, like I said, it's just the thing of, like, you wish that they had more time together. That, you know, it just, that it didn't take this long for things. But I guess, like, everything happens for a reason, you know, it's, you know. And it's so interesting because we also heard the conversation about his wife, Cheryl. Apparently she died in '89 from cancer. He hasn't gotten contact with his children, which is so interesting because he's in a very similar situation to Cliff to a certain extent because, like, he doesn't want to put his situation on his boys. It's like they were so young when that accident happened, so who am I to kind of come into their lives and dump all this on them? A very similar thing to Cliff and Clara, but it's like you deserve happiness. You know, deserve to kind of move on and be someone. And I'm curious to see what ends up happening with Larry. Will he find that special someone? Because it's like I said, this all kind of ties in with the fact is that, like, oh, Larry has a hard time just like letting himself go. We saw that even in Danny Street. Like, the fact is that in his head, he kind of cut loose and had that musical, but he never did it. But then at the end of the episode, you see that when him and Vic get dropped off, he's got the microphone. So I think he did kind of let himself unwind eventually, but it took some time. But sadly, you know, John ends up passing away. You know, and they have that one last moment with each other, you know, in, you know, that dream state with each other. Larry also said something I thought was kind of fascinating where it's like, oh yeah, like, he hasn't been alone. There is kind of someone in his life, that being the creature, you know, the negative spirit, being like, yeah, it's always there within me, and the fact of the matter is we're not necessarily friends, but he's like, I definitely feel a connection. And he's like, I think he's starting to understand it a little bit more, and he's thankful for the negative spirit giving him that time. And like I was saying earlier, just like the music of playing over this moment combined with what happened with Cliff was like very beautiful, you know. It's like I said, sad, somber, yet beautiful, you know. So very, very interesting episode. I'm very interested to see where everything takes us going forward into the next episode with all of this, as we see that everyone is, you know, in the process of trying to figure their shit out, you know, still. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens next. Obviously, the team's going to try and, you know, rescue Vic. Obviously, he's still looking for Niles, and there's still everything with the hairy woman, like what that whole thing is. Like, once again, still a lot of Niles secrets that need to be unpacked. So it's going to be, I'm interested to see, like, where the next episode takes us with everything. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good